author.
That's right.
But I think what's really fascinating about her, about Lilly Singh, is how she uses her platform to advocate for change,
Hmm.
especially when it comes to gender equality.
Yeah. And, she does it all with this just incredible energy and humor,
Yeah.
which is something we'll get into a little bit later.
Right. You don't often see that kind of approach when
I
it
know.
comes to these kinds of issues, which is what makes it so interesting. So where should we even begin with this? What stood out to you as like the most important takeaway from everything we read?
Well, for me, it all goes back to her belief in the power of stories. She actually has this quote where she says, "Most of what we know is from a story. What you believe you can or cannot do or be is a story." It's such a simple idea, but it's actually really profound when you think about it.
Okay, so let's break that down for a second. I mean, we all love a good story, but how does that connect to something like gender equality?
Well, think about it this way. For generations, girls and women, they've been told stories that limit their potential, right? They're often portrayed as, the damsel in distress or sidekicks, or it's all about their beauty. And these stories, they really shape our understanding of what's possible, and what's expected of us. And Singh is trying to kind of flip that script.
So it's not just about telling new stories then, but it's about challenging the old ones.
Exactly.
And that's where her Unicorn Island initiative comes in.
Yes.
Unicorn Island. Okay. I have to admit, I was a little confused when I first saw that in the materials. What is that exactly?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds kind of whimsical, right? It doesn't really scream social change.
Right. It does have this kind of playful name, but the work that they're doing is really serious business. There are two branches to Unicorn Island. There's Unicorn Island Productions, which is all about creating content that amplifies diverse voices.
Okay.
And then you have the Unicorn Island Fund, which is dedicated to tackling shame, particularly the shame that's often directed at women.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
How does the fund actually work? I mean, how do you fight shame with money?
Well, they're funding projects that use storytelling to challenge those harmful narratives and create space for open and honest conversations about things that, we're often told to keep quiet about.
Right.
So, for example, they're supporting this documentary that explores the impact of societal expectations on young girls' self-esteem. And then there's a series of workshops that use creative writing to help women process and reclaim their experiences with shame, which I think is really cool.
Okay, so it sounds like they're not just throwing money at the problem, but
Yeah.
actually being strategic about how they use it
Yeah.
to support projects that align with her vision.
Exactly. And that vision is all about empowerment. It's about giving people the tools they need to tell their own stories, challenge the status quo, and create a world where everyone feels seen and valued.
It's a powerful message for sure, but why focus on shame? I mean, there's so many issues facing women around the world.
That's true.
So why focus on that particular one?
Well, as Singh sees it, shame is a major barrier to equality. It's this thing that's often ingrained in girls and women from a very young age. It keeps us quiet, makes us doubt ourselves, and it prevents us from reaching our full potential, I think.
I'm starting to see how this all connects, but can you give me like a concrete example?
Yeah.
How does shame actually play out in the real world?
Well, think about all the messages girls and women receive about their bodies, their sexuality, their ambitions. We're often told to be small, to be quiet, to be pleasing. We're shamed for being too loud or too ambitious, too sexual. And this shame, it has this ripple effect. It impacts our career choices, our relationships, even our mental health.
Wow, I'm realizing how much I've internalized some of those messages, without even realizing it.
It's insidious, isn't it? It's often so deeply ingrained that we don't even recognize it as a problem. And I think that's why Singh is making it a central part of her work. She wants to bring these conversations out into the open and challenge the systems that perpetuate shame.
And she's using her platform to do it, which is incredible, right?
Absolutely.
She's not shying away from these uncomfortable topics. In fact, she's leaning into them. Take her film, Doing It, for example.
Right. That's
Yeah.
a perfect example. She uses humor and storytelling to tackle a subject that's often considered taboo: women's sexuality and pleasure. It's a comedy, but it deals with some pretty serious stuff.
Definitely. I mean, using humor to talk about women's sexuality and pleasure, that's pretty bold.
It is.
But I think it's also incredibly effective.
I agree.
It makes these conversations more approachable, I think.
Yeah, it kind of disarms the audience a little bit, right? And it allows them to engage with these topics in a way that might not feel so threatening.
Right.
And that's something that she talks about a lot. Lilly Singh, she really believes that humor is a powerful tool for social change, right?
Hmm.
It can break down barriers, challenge taboos, and ultimately, I think, create a more open and accepting world.
Yeah, speaking of a more open and accepting world, I was really interested in her work as a UN SDG advocate.
Yeah, that's really
It's
cool.
clear that her vision is much bigger than just Hollywood, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Her work with the UN really shows her dedication to gender equality on like a global scale.
Mm.
The SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, they're basically like this set of 17 goals that the United Nations adopted to address the world's most pressing challenges.
Yeah, huge things like poverty, hunger, education, climate change, and obviously gender equality.
Right.
And Singh is particularly focused on Goal 5, achieving gender equality. And what I found interesting is that she really emphasizes that this isn't just a women's issue, it affects everybody.
Yeah. And I think that's a really important point to make because often these conversations are framed as women should care about this, but it's like
Right.
gender equality, it actually benefits everyone. Societies that empower women, they're more prosperous, more peaceful, even more innovative.
So how does her work with the UN actually translate into action? I mean, these goals are huge and
Mhm.
complex. It can feel really overwhelming
I know
to
that.
know where to even begin, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think she would be the first to admit that there's no easy answer. But I think what she's trying to do is use her platform to raise awareness,
Right.
to inspire people to get involved, and really advocate for policies that actually promote gender equality.
Okay, so that brings us back to the power of storytelling then, right?
Exactly. She believes that everyone has a story
Hmm.
and that these stories can change the world. She's encouraging people to share their experiences,
Yeah.
to challenge those harmful narratives we talked about, and to use their words and actions to create a more just and equitable world, which I think is really amazing.
It is a beautiful message, but not everyone has the same platform or the same resources that she has. How does she address that?
That's a good point. One thing she focuses on is amplifying marginalized voices.
Hmm.
She's always using her platform to share the stories of people who are overlooked or silenced. And she's also a huge advocate for mentorship and supporting other women in whatever they're trying to do.
Which is a good reminder that
Yep.
we can all play a role in creating change,
Exactly.
even if we don't have millions of followers or
Yeah.
whatever. It's about using what we do have,
Mm-hmm.
our relationships, our workplaces, our communities, to advocate for equality
Yeah.
and support others who are doing the same.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that those small actions, they can have a big impact.
Hmm.
And it starts with being willing to listen,
Yeah.
to learn, and to use our voices to speak up for what we believe in.
That's the essence of her message, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about gender equality. It's about creating a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive and reach their full potential,
Exactly.
and live a life free from shame and oppression.
Right. And she's doing it all with this incredible blend of humor, heart, and intelligence.
Yeah, it's really inspiring.
It is. And I think it's important to remember she's not just an entertainer, she's a leader,
Right.
an activist, and a role model for a generation of young people who really want to make a difference in the world.
I'm glad we had the chance to really dive into her work today.
Me too.
It's given me a lot to think about, and I hope our listeners feel the same way.
Me too. She's a true force for good, I think,
Yeah, for sure.
in the world.
Wow, it's incredible how much we've uncovered just talking about Lilly Singh,
I know, right?
She's really doing it all.
Yeah, she is. And it's amazing how she manages to weave this idea of social consciousness into everything she does.
Yeah.
Whether it's a movie, a book, even partnering with the UN.
One thing that stood out to me was this whole thing about not knowing everything. She talks about it a lot with the SDGs,
Yeah.
encouraging people to be curious, to ask questions, even if you don't have all the answers.
Right. And I think that's so important, especially now when we're just bombarded with information all the time. It's
Right.
easy to get overwhelmed, feel intimidated by how huge all these global issues are. But what she's saying is it's okay to not know everything.
Right.
It's okay to ask questions and be open to changing your mind.
It's about being willing to have those uncomfortable conversations,
Yeah.
even when you don't know the right answer.
Exactly. And realizing that we all have something to contribute,
Mhm.
right? You don't have to be an expert to make a difference.
So if someone's listening and they're feeling inspired by Lilly Singh and what she's doing, what's one thing they can do, like a real tangible thing to make a difference?
Well, I think just being more aware of how gender inequality shows up in our everyday lives is a good start. Pay attention to the stories we hear, the things we believe, and even those little power dynamics in our relationships and at work.
Hmm.
Once you start seeing these things, you can start to, like, challenge them.
Yeah, and we can support the people who are already out there making a difference.
Oh, absolutely.
There are so many amazing organizations and people fighting for gender equality.
Yeah, and there are so many ways to help. Donate to a cause, volunteer your time, or just amplify the voices of those who are already doing the work.
I think the main thing is realizing that we all have a role to play.
Yeah.
There's no action that's too small.
Exactly.
Even just talking about these things, raising awareness, challenging the way things are, all of it can make a difference.
I totally agree. Change starts with each of us, I think.
Well, that about wraps up our deep dive into Lilly Singh and all the amazing things she's doing. I'm feeling super inspired. How about you?
Oh, totally. She's such a force for good.
If you want to learn more about her Unicorn Island initiative and how you can get involved, head over to her website at unicornisland.com/fund.
And thanks for listening to the Global Heroes Podcast. Make sure you're following us on social media and subscribe to our newsletter for your weekly dose of good news. We'll see you next time.